What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast. Today, I am talking about the first book in the Wheel of Time series, The Eye of the World. I'm actually doing this one on my own because Gabe, Gabe did not like this book very much, and he felt like he didn't have much to say on it. I think it just didn't grab him or wasn't his cup of tea. So I'm trying to do something new today, and we'll see how it goes. I kind of hate to test this new format on something as well loved as the Wheel of Time, but I absolutely need to talk about this book after reading it, and hopefully I can do it justice. Because usually for my quick my quick solo reviews, I mostly have it in kind of a scripted format that I'm reading from. But for this, I'm just working off the normal podcast notes that we use every week. So we'll see how I do. I'll do a quick spoiler-free section like in my quick reviews, and then I'll give you a spoiler warning once I get to that point. But before we get started, we would very much appreciate it if you would hit those like and subscribe buttons here on YouTube. And you can follow us on Twitter to keep up with what we're reading each week at Files Fantasy, or just look up the Fantasy Files podcast. Our next episodes should be the Haunting of Hill House for, Halloween time, and a brand new King Killer episode, as our recurring guest and friend Chris has just finished The Name of the Wind for the very first time. So we want to get his kind of impressions and see what he thought of that book. Plus, our first episode was also King Killer, but it was our first episode, and it was super rough. There was literally like no editing or anything. So I think we're excited to give that another go, and get another chance to really get into King Killer. Plus, this time around, we'd only be doing the first book as opposed to doing both of them in the same episode. So I think we'll be able to dig into that first book a lot more. Before I get into The Eye of the World, I'll tell you guys a little bit about what I've been reading. So I read Hill House, and the Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Um, and it was all right. I initially, after I finished it, I initially like almost didn't like it. I was like, man, I wish I had chosen kind of a more like modern horror book. But after listening to some other people's podcasts and some other people's like analysis of it, I definitely have like an understanding of how like influential it was in the horror genre and the kind of things that Shirley Jackson was trying to portray in that novel. So I definitely have a little bit more of a respect now. But I think that'll be a fun episode when we do that next. I also read the Expanse book number 5, which was Nemesis Games, and it it was also just kind of like I don't know. It was all right, and I know the next book is going to be a little bit of a slog too. So I'm hoping with book 7, it kind of gets back to what we expect from the Expanse. But Nemesis Games was cool because it followed every single POV, and I think there was 5 of them. They were all from characters that we've met, mostly the crew on the Rocinante. And so it was cool to like just focus on the crew, and kind of all their different points of view. So yeah, it was very okay. And I already read some reviews on the 6th book, and people said that it was very much a slog. Some people were even saying that you should just read like a plot summary of it, which I'm not going to do, but it worries me a little bit, but I'm going to read it and get through it and get to the next one. Like I know that the series has more to offer, and I'm trying to get to the point where I can read the final book that comes out this November, either right as it comes out or around the time that it comes out. So I'm trying to make my way through those pretty quick. I'm also reading The Name of the Wind, obviously, for one of the next episodes. And God, I love that book so much. Man, there is so many reasons to love that book. One of which is it's probably Nick Podell's best audiobook performance. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah, that's a very, very special book. I think that's all that I've read since the last episode. I think I did read one of the Expanse short stories, and I think it was also very okay. I'm gonna read the other ones too. I think the one that I happened to read just had like some weird subject matter, and so I was very like kind of iffy on it. But I am excited to read the other short stories, especially because one is about Amos when he lived in Baltimore, and so I'm really itching to read that one. All right, so let's get into some spoiler-free talk about The Eye of the World. Let's talk about like the basic plot. So it mostly follows Rand, and he starts out in this kind of small town village called Emmons Field in this region called the Two Rivers. And they're preparing for a springtime festival. And so this small town is kind of like you follow them for a couple chapters of them just like getting ready, like getting the ale ready, getting all the, they have like some special guests and stuff that are coming in. And so they're getting the town ready for that. And at the end of the kind of the first day of all that, Rand and his father live out on a farm just outside Emmons Field, or maybe on like the edges of it. And his father is like, instead of staying in the city tonight, let's like go back to the farm and we'll come back, midday tomorrow. So they go back home, and in the middle of the night, there is this Trolloc attack. And Trollocs are like kind of a menagerie of all these different animals, like think, big trolls or orcs or something. But they're just like a mismatch of all these different types of animals. And so it attacks the house, and it hurts his father. So he has to get his father back to town to get him help. And when he gets him there, he realizes that the rest of the town has been absolutely like attacked by Trollocs, and it's been like this huge thing. People have been fighting them like all night. And in the midst of all this happening, a stranger named Moraine has showed up to the town. And she is what's known as an Aes Sedai, which is basically our mages of this world. And so she has been helping the town, like she's been attacking the Trollocs and like doing all this stuff to like, get the Trollocs away from the town. And so I'm trying to figure out like what's a spoiler or not, because this is all within the first like couple chapters. But basically she decides that there are three boys in the town, Rand, Matt, and Perrin, and they're all friends. They're all born around the same time, I think within like weeks of each other. And so she believes that the Dark One is after them for whatever reason. They're special in some way. And so her and her kind of bodyguard type person, Lan, tries to get the boys out of the town, and they're joined by a few other people that also live in the town. And they kind of go on this grand adventure, I guess, to get to the other Aes Sedai to find sanctuary, because these Trollocs and other like dark monsters and enemies and stuff are like hunting them. And so they basically just like start going across the world or continent or whatever to kind of outrun these attacks and to get to safety. And that's really where our story picks up. I don't want to go too much farther than that because spoilers. And I didn't talk about a lot of the characters that are in the town. And I don't want to go too much farther than that because of spoilers, but that's the basic gist of what's going on. The characters, so like I said, we have Rand, who is the son of this farmer Tam. All these names are very similar. They're very hard to keep straight. I think that's one of the issues that Gabe was having. But so Rand is kind of like I said, he's like our main character. He's kind of this you know he's kind of this like would be hero. Like I'm sure at some point in the series he's going to become like the hero of the story, right? And so he's really like our main guy that we're following for most of the book. His friends Matt and Perrin. Matt is like a kind of just like a weaselly prankster kind of guy. He's very funny. I liked him a lot. But he's kind of like the class clown of the town, I guess. And so nobody really trusts anything he says because he is such a prankster and he's always like kind of crying wolf and doing all these different things like that. And so everybody just kind of disregards his opinion at any given time. Perrin is the son of the blacksmith, and he is kind of this like gentle giant in a way. Like he's like a very he's not taller than Rand, but he's like just very big because he's a blacksmith's apprentice. So he's like this big dude, and he's always having to be very careful about like hurting people and just kind of like being the whole bull in a china shop. And then we have Egwene and Nynaeve. And Nynaeve is what is known as the wisdom of the town. She's kind of the honestly, I didn't understand what her position was that well. Like she's kind of like the head of the women in the town. She's like the women's leader because the town has like a mayor, but then there's like also this like women's group that she's in charge of, and I think she also has like healing capabilities, not necessarily magical, but just like she's like a medic kind of thing. And then Egwene is her apprentice and Rand's love interest. There's like a mutual kind of love interest going on there. Then there's Moraine, who's the Aes Sedai that comes into the town. And that's pretty much our cast of characters. There's a lot more, but for like the main players, like that's the cast of characters. Not to mention Lan, he's Moraine's bodyguard kind of person, known as a warder. But yeah, that's pretty much our group who kind of eventually ventures out, and we get to follow these guys. So why did I like this book, or what did I like about it? This book, I loved it so much. Like as soon as I started it, I was just completely hooked. I started with a physical copy because I didn't plan on, like, usually if I'm planning on doing a podcast episode for something, I'll do like an audiobook because then I can get through it really quick. But I was just reading this at night for like an hour for an hour a night. And those books that I do that with, I usually don't pick up the audiobook version because they're just something I'm kind of taking my time on, like Stormlight Archive is what I'm doing that with right now. But I got to a point where the Trolloc attack had happened and it was a Sunday night and I was going to work the next day. And it was just this feeling of like, I have to know what happens next. And so I bought the audiobook and listened to it all day during work. And yeah, I was just completely sucked in. I think it's like a super it's just like a really cozy story. Like I imagine, reading this book by the fire late at night or something. It's just a very like kind of comforting story, and characters are really good. Like I've been told multiple times, like this is a character driven fantasy series. And so yeah, I would say the character work is absolutely outstanding. The plot was good. It probably wasn't like, after it got going, it was kind of like, okay, I see where this plot's going and I can kind of guess what's going to happen. But that is because a lot of this book is based off Lord of the Rings, which I'll talk about later in the spoiler section. But this book takes a lot of inspiration from Lord of the Rings and kind of follows that outline. And so I think that's why it was a little predictable, I guess, but not at all in a bad way. Like I said, I very much enjoyed this book. Yeah, I think this book would be perfect, like absolutely perfect if you've read Lord of the Rings and haven't read The Eye of the World. You absolutely need to read Eye of the World because it is like right in line with it, and it is fans of Lord of the Rings are going to love this. I've also heard people making comparisons to Stormlight Archive. I would say that Stormlight is a lot more contemporary and a lot more, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's Brandon Sanderson, it's just a more, like low barrier to entry kind of story. Maybe, I don't even know if that's accurate. I don't know how to describe it. But I would say it's a fair comparison. They're both like epic fantasy that follow multiple point of views in a big world with lots of world building. Very like fantasy. So yeah, take that for what you will. Yeah, I think these characters, by the end of it, I was so committed and I was so just like engrossed in this world. And by the end of it, I just immediately wanted to start the second book. So I can't recommend it enough. If you think that kind of an older fantasy with some of the more classic tropes is going to be your thing, and if you can kind of just like take a moment to like really think about what's happened, because there's a lot that like gets explained and a lot of like kind of backstory that gets revealed for like the world. And so if you can really like think your way through that stuff, then I highly recommend it. If you're the kind of person that needs things like explicitly told to you, like right there, then this might not be the book for you. But honestly, this first book, people talk about this series having a high barrier to entry. And again, I'm brand new to this series, so what do I know? But this book seemed like it had a very easy, barrier to entry compared to what I was expecting, which is why I picked up the audiobook. Because when I started reading the physical copy, I kind of had this feeling like, oh, this isn't bad at all. Like I didn't really have any problem getting through it. And so, I think it just kind of depends on the person, but yeah, I highly recommend it. All right, I am going to stop blubbering and go into the spoiler section. So spoilers for the first book in the Wheel of Time in 3, 2, 1. You've been warned. Okay, so like I said, I absolutely loved this book. There was so many things I loved about it. One of the things was I really liked how Jordan's world building is so well realized and kind of shows just like the reality of the world. Like the further you are removed by both time and space from historical events, the more confused you are about them. So like everyone in the Two Rivers thinking that Aes Sedai are evil and that they were the ones that like broke the world. Or I think Two Rivers didn't even know that they were part of a queen's like kingdom. Like when I forget who tells him. It might have been Tom Maryland, but somebody tells Rand that like the Two Rivers is part of like the Queen's, region. And he was like, "What? Like nobody's ever told me that." Um, and not only that, but Jordan does a really good job with, you know, like the prophecy and kind of how the world was broken as you get out of the Two Rivers and get closer to like Camelin and I think it's Tar Valon is where the Aes Sedai are. um that prophecy and the recounting of those events changes a lot. And so it's really interesting how he thought that through and made the world so cohesive, I guess. Um, so I thought the traveling scenes got a bit tedious. I'm sure that's not a unpopular opinion. The book was really strong at the beginning, and then they traveled for a while and they were kind of just going from town to town to town. And it got a little tedious. And then when they all split up, then you get all these different point of views. You get three point of views as opposed to just one. And it really started to grip me a little bit more. um, I love the friendships in these books. I Now I totally get what people mean when they say that this is like a highly character focused book. I will definitely be reading the rest of this series, not only for the plot, but also in big part due to the friendships and kind of the relationships we have here. And I want to see what happens with Rand and Matt and how that friendship kind of, you know, degrades maybe depending on what happens in the next book, or maybe it gets stronger and Matt gets better. But or like his relationship with Egwene, I'm sure they're going to end up together, and I can't wait to see that. I think that's a really good romance. It's very very tropey and stereotypical, but I still like it a lot. It really grabbed me. And um yeah, I think the two of them are really good together. And he even says that he's going to be her warder when she becomes an Aes Sedai. Like that would be super cool. So yeah, I loved the characters. Talk about Robert Jordan for a minute here. I really don't know that much about him, but I was listening to a podcast the other day that said that he wrote a bunch of other books in different genres under various pen names to kind of distinguish each work. And he even wrote a book on dancing or something, like some sort of like uh some sort of book on dance. And so I thought that was super funny, but they're all under different pen names so that he doesn't get like, you know, his other works don't carry the weight of Robert Jordan, right? And so I think that was a super smart move. He takes a lot of inspiration from Lord of the Rings and classic fantasy, because at the time, everybody was kind of, every publisher was looking for the next Lord of the Rings. Like that's really the only thing that they cared about. So in order to get this book published, he had to do something very similar to Lord of the Rings. And people talk about that nonstop. I'm not really going to go into it anymore, but I thought that was interesting because in today's publishing, like the fantasy genre is huge and publishers are looking for anything that is original and gripping and fun. But at the time they were just like, we need the next Lord of the Rings. Like that's what we need from you. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. I didn't really care, I didn't really care about it being similar to the Lord of the Rings, mostly because I've never read the Lord of the Rings, and I haven't really read a whole lot of classic fantasy besides, I don't know if you want to consider the Time Master trilogy classic fantasy. I don't know when it was published. It's definitely a little bit older, but yeah, so I have not read a whole lot of classic fantasy, and so a lot of these tropes weren't new to me because I knew about them, but it was pretty much the first time I had ever read them. And so I think that's why it felt so cozy to me, because it felt like something that is tried and true and something that I can just kind of, fall back on this very like cozy story, because it's so tried and true. Like this is like the foundation of fantasy that other authors and like have other authors have built upon. Like a lot of people take inspiration from the Wheel of Time. And so it felt like the whole time I was reading it, even though it was published in like 1990, I felt like I was reading a part of like fantasy history, and that felt very cool. So Michael Kramer and Kate Redding were the audiobook narrators. They did a good job. I really enjoyed their voices for each of the characters. They did separate voices for all these different characters. I thought they were well done. However, I kind of felt like Michael and Kate weren't quite on the same page as far as what the characters sounded like, because Kate has obviously whole chapters and Michael has whole chapters, and it's mostly Michael that is doing the narrating. But the characters in each of their chapters sounded very different. So like Kate's Egwene sounded very different from Michael's Egwene. And not just because you have a male and female voices, like it just the way the character was portrayed sounded very different. And so I'm hoping in the next couple books they kind of get on the same page a little bit more. And I'm hoping that like the audio quality in general kind of goes up, and I'm sure it will. Like the first Dresden Files book was very sketchy. Like the first Dresden Files audiobook was very sketchy. And the audio quality is just low. There's like a really tiny hiss in the background. And so I'm sure that as I go on with the audiobooks, the quality will improve over time. But it really wasn't that bad. I really didn't have as much of an issue with it as I normally do with like bad audiobooks. But yeah, it was fine. I'm not entirely sure why they needed two narrators, because Michael was doing he was doing Perrin's chapters and Rand's chapters, but he did voices for the women. So I don't know why. I don't know why he didn't just do Nynaeve's chapters, but it's whatever, you know. We'll see how it goes as I go along. Talking about the storytelling here, it's limited. It's limited third person. The point of view mostly follows Rand until about halfway through when they all get split up, like I said, at which point we get 3 point of views. The the prose itself in this book never blew me away. Like it wasn't flowery and it wasn't like bad, but it was just fine, and that's totally fine with me. I don't need prose to blow me away. I just need like a good story and good characters. But I don't think I have any quotable moments from this book. Like something like King Killer. I'm like, I don't know, 6 hours in and I already have like 10 or 12 quotes written down. And so this just didn't I just couldn't find that many quotable moments, which is fine. That's all right. At the end of the book, there's a interview with Jordan, in the audiobook at least. And Jordan wanted to it's such a cool concept because he wanted to write time, the concept of time as a wheel, for it to be circular and ever repeating, which is terrifying. To make it so that at one point in the books, our real world that we're living in right now really happened. And we are the source of their myths and legends, just as they are the source of ours. So yeah, I absolutely love the idea of like how time works and how things repeat. So like there are things in their world that are from our time period. Like I'm pretty sure at one point one of the characters references like a satellite dish, like he's talking about like a half moon. It's like not a half moon, like I guess hollowed out half moon with like a big silver spike coming out of it. And I'm like, that's got to be a satellite dish. And there was a few other things like that, which were really cool. But basically the idea that everything that is happening has happened like a million times. And this battle has just been going on forever and ever and ever and ever. And nobody's been able to stop this cycle. I think that's super interesting, and I can't wait to see that get explored further. I love how all three boys are basically reincarnations of certain mantles or heroes, to fulfill the pattern or the prophecy. Like we see, Perrin has some weird powers with his wolves, and then Matt out of nowhere gives like this Manetheren battle cry. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And I think somebody was saying he might have the lineage of one of the Manetheren kings. So I'm excited to see that get explored further. And like I said before, I really loved how prophecy is done in this book, where no one has like a super clear idea of exactly what the prophecy is, or they all have different like interpretations. So I really like that part. The world building was fantastic in this book. So let's start with the two rivers. So they are largely oblivious of the outside world. They have no idea that they're part of a bigger kingdom. They kind of like keep to themselves and don't really worry about the outside world. It's kind of our Shire, from what I understand. Yeah, I loved everything that happened in the two rivers. Like I just wanted to stay in those chapters so bad, just hearing them get ready for the festival, and it was just like it was like such wholesome kind of medieval life. And I really liked that. I loved hearing them get ready for the festival, and just how all the friends were like interacting, and just them kind of like standing around and talking to each other and just doing normal stuff. I actually really liked that a lot. So I wish we had gotten some more time in that. The closest city to Two Rivers was I'm gonna mispronounce it, Terran Ferry, I think. And they like hate each other. The two towns don't like each other at all. They don't trust each other for whatever reason. I didn't really understand why, but yeah. And then they're all on their way to Camelin, and so Camelin is like the big city that's kind of like, you know, how I would picture like Rome or something. Like it's like the main big city, the capital. At least I think it is. I could be totally wrong about it, but that's how it felt. And they're all on their way to the Ice to Die place, which we didn't get to see in this book. I thought for sure by the end of the book we would see the Tarvalin, I think it's called, is the main like area where all the Aes Sedai are. But in the end, we ended up going to the Eye of the World, and so that was super interesting to go there instead. I definitely was not. I was not expecting that. I had no idea what the Eye of the World was going to be. Um, and it kind of took me by surprise when it got revealed. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting too. That brought us to like the most fantasy place that we had seen so far in the book. That was pretty cool. And then there's fantasy creatures like Trollocs, Murdraw, and Ogiers. I already talked about what the Trollocs are. The Murdraw, from what I understood, are kind of like they lead groups of Trollocs. I hope I'm understanding that right, but they're like the leaders in the army, like they're, you know, like the generals, I guess. And these guys were legitimately scary. Like the whole first part of the book where the Murdraw is like following Rand and following the three boys. And I didn't want to talk about that in the spoiler free section because I didn't know, I couldn't remember when it got revealed that it was a Murdraw. And so I didn't want to like spoil that. But the the Murdraw in this book, like just completely faceless, like we've seen the trailers for the Wheel of Time series now, and it, you know, that was because I had seen that before I started reading the book, so I pictured them exactly like how they're in the trailer. And yeah, they're pretty scary, and like just it's I love this mystery at the beginning of the book when Rand is just trying to figure out what this thing is that is following them, and they're all kind of putting pieces together, and they're like, oh, I saw it, you saw it too, and everyone's kind of working together to figure out what it is. And so that was a lot of fun. And whenever the Murdraw show up, they are like scary. Like they seem like they would definitely be the ones who would kill you. And because, you know, the plot must go on, and they, you know, they had to get to their destination, they were always able to like outrun one. There was never there might have been a couple close calls, but I never felt like a Murdraw was going to get them. But yeah, they were a fun baddie. Ogiers are awesome. I'll talk about that a little bit in the character section. But it is as far as world building goes, it's interesting to see how this society is ran, because it's mostly ran by women, right? Because women are the only ones able to use magic. They are inherently, just like women in general are inherently more in control in this world. Like having a queen instead of a king, having the like the women's circle in the Two Rivers, and of course the Aes Sedai. It just kind of permeates throughout the world, and we see how the women have the most control because they're the ones in charge of the magic. Like they're the only ones who can use magic safely. And so kind of that idea of women being in charge just kind of permeates throughout the rest of the world. And that's really good world building. Like that shows a ripple effect of this person has power. They have the most power. And because of that, there's all these other changes. And so I really, really appreciated that. I think Jordan really thought that through and had a really good plan for this world. The magic system was pretty cool. I've heard that it becomes more complex in later books. And so I'm looking forward to that, because right now it's kind of a soft magic system from what's been explained so far. But it's very cool. We get to see all sorts of uses of magic, like summoning flame, lightning, teleportation, major gusts of wind and water. And when Moraine takes down that ship, she sinks the ferry. That was really cool. And of course, Rand using the one power at the end, like throwing up a wall of flame, like that was sick. So I can tell that this magic system is going to be very flashy. It's going to be very cool magic, like, you know, like Brandon Sanderson says, like err on the side of awesome, right? Yeah, but so far what's been explained is we have the one power, or the true source, and it turns the wheel of time and drives the universe, which magic users are then able to pull from. And the one power is consisted of two halves, like a yin and yang. One is the male side and one is the female side, and they each have their own like attributes. Like they both have to work together to make a cohesive, like magical society, I guess. Like one isn't better than the other. And so I really like the idea of that, and I like the idea of how at least for now, like the men's magic is tainted and it can't be used. And so hopefully Rand will find a way to free that so that men can use magic again, and kind of like restore that balance. Or something I just thought about is maybe he will find a way to get rid of magic altogether, which from what I understand, it would possibly stop turning the wheel of time. And so that would be interesting to see, like what would happen if the wheel of time were to stop. Yeah, man, that's cool. I just thought about that. But yeah, if men try to use the one source, they go insane, which is what we see with Luce Theron at the beginning. And I couldn't tell from that prologue if like the event that was taking place in the prologue was the time, what was the point where the magic got tainted, or if it had happened way before that. Because from what I understand and from what I've heard, from what I kind of gathered from the book, I guess, is if you're the dragon, you're supposed to be the one guy who doesn't go insane from using magic, right? So Luce Theron was definitely insane. He killed his whole family. And so I'm kind of wondering, like, why that happened to him, like why he went insane. And so I'm interested to see how the rest of the book kind of explains that. Okay, so talking about some characters here, I loved how diverse of a cast we got. I loved how all the characters were very, very different and had different opinions on what to do and why. Most of the characters like did not really agree with each other in any given situation. and they kind of had to take somewhat of a vote, or like Moraine or Lan would just like overrule them and be like, no, this is what we're doing. And so, it was kind of interesting to see how they all played against each other and with each other. And so I very much like that dynamic, because I feel like I don't see that often enough in fantasy books. Like usually there's like a group and they all just kind of decide like, okay, we need to do this thing, and then they go do it, and there's no like conflict there. And so I really like that about this book. Also, most of the characters are very young. Like most of these characters are like what, 17, 18? But the book does not feel like a YA book at all. Like not at all. And so I thought that was pretty cool that he was able to pull that off. So let's talk about Rand. Like I know it's super, super basic, but he was easily my favorite character. I really, really liked Rand, especially kind of assuming that he's like the main like hero of the story that's gonna restore balance to the world. And I just really liked who he was. He's like he's somewhat curious, but he also plays it safe and kind of like tries to keep his cards close to his chest and doesn't like reveal too much like Matt does. And I feel like he just has like a very good head on his shoulders. Like he's definitely like the leader. Like you can tell that he's like gonna be a good leader as he kind of grows up a little bit. And he kind of like questions himself along the way, like I have no idea what I'm doing, or like I'm just kind of like fumbling my way through this or whatever. But I can tell from his growth over the course of this book that he is going to become a very strong character, a very good leader of a character. I can't wait to see where his character goes. I love the idea that he will have to contain and figure out his powers in the next book, in order to eventually, save the world, and like I said, kind of restore balance. I think that it's going to be interesting to see him struggle through that, and I'm really excited for the inevitable like kind of like training montage of him figuring out his powers and kind of learning what he can and can't do. I'm really, really looking forward to that. Rand is also a prime target of the like the Dark Lord. He's having all these very like disturbing dreams. And so are the other two boys. They're all having dreams too, where the Dark Lord is trying to influence them, and at every turn and in every dream they kind of bat off the Dark Lord, and they get through the dream. But Matt, I kind of wonder if in any of his dreams he did give in to the Dark Lord a little bit, especially with the dagger that he has. Because these like Dark Friends and Murdraw and Trollocs are always like one step behind them. And part of that has got to do with the dagger, kind of like having the one ring in Lord of the Rings, right? The enemies were always like one step behind Frodo, and you can see that kind of mirrored in this book a lot. I loved the friendship with Matt, and kind of the back and forth, taking care of each other when they were on the road and like homeless, and kind of going from inn to inn, and just kind of like how they had to work together. Like there was one point where Rand was really sick, and one point where Matt was not feeling good, and so they had to like take turns like taking care of each other. Matt was such an idiot though. He makes so many mistakes, because he slowly goes insane. Like finally we get like kind of a Gollum moment near the end of the book, where he's held on to this dagger for like 75% of the book now. And Moraine is able to heal him somewhat, but then I think it was if she were to remove the dagger from his possession, it might get worse. His condition might get worse. And so I'm really interested to see how he overcomes that and if he can turn it around. My theory is that Matt is going to become evil somehow. Like he's going to become some sort of dark friend. And I don't think he's going to remain in this group very long. I think in the second, I would think that in the second book he's going to get lured away and he's going to join the Dark One. And of course, I mentioned earlier, Matt yells a war cry when they're confronted by Trollocs, which is an old Manetheren war cry. Moraine says the old blood sings, and also the old blood runs strong through the two rivers. And so, you know, I'm interested to see how that comes about, because obviously this whole cast of characters is going to be some like descendant or reincarnation of the heroes from the past in Manetheren. I'm really interested to see how all that kind of plays out. Like I said, Perrin is a large guy. He has to be careful about not hurting people. He's kind and watches out for Egwene. He's a proper gentleman. He's also willing to kill Egwene to save her from the death of the Ravens when Elias and all of them are running. And that was interesting because I see why he would want to do that, but kind of like his reaction to it was like horrified. So I'm like, I'm interested to see if he has any more thoughts like that, because he was like ready to do it from what I remember. Of course, his hatchet is awesome. I loved how he's got this awesome, just gnarly looking hatchet. He's a wolf brother, I think, but he can feel it when wolves get hurt. And when rescued, Lan says that he knows what Perrin is. So I'm interested to see that get explored a little bit more. Okay, just a couple more characters that I wanted to mention. Moraine is awesome. She is like wise and always looking out for the kids. She's got a very good head on her shoulders. She has a much better idea of what is going on than anybody else does, really. And so she's still got a lot of secrets. I'm interested to see how many of those kind of get revealed in the next book and so on. Lan, her warder, was awesome. He's, you know, very, very like stoic until the end with Nynaeve, when he's just like basically, you know, quoting poetry at her. He's just like being a smooth talking ladies man at the end there. Yeah, there was, I think there was some things that I didn't quite pick up on with Lan, because when I was listening to some other podcasts, people were talking about kind of his backstory, and I think I kind of missed that, so I might have to see if that gets kind of re-explained in the next book, or maybe ask some friends what they can tell me about it without spoilers. Like I said, Egwene is a great character. She's super impressionable. So at first she wanted to be like exactly like Nynaeve, until she met Moraine, and then she wanted to be exactly like Moraine. I'm kind of hoping that she finds her own path somewhere in the middle, because yeah, she's definitely impressionable, and if there's like a leader figure, she will just like automatically follow them. I think she's a very good love interest for Rand. Like I said, I really hope to see them together. Nynaeve, I hated Nynaeve. Like I could not stand this character. And I've heard people saying that she gets like way better in the later books. And so I'm kind of excited to see where she goes. But oh man, she thinks she is so smart, but has no idea about the world. And like all the other characters are willing to accept that they don't know things and let Moraine kind of lead them in this book. And for the most part, kind of trust Moraine's judgment. But Nynaeve is so like inherently um almost like anti-authority, like because she kind of is the authority in the Two Rivers in a way. And so I think she hates like Moraine for that reason. But yeah, I just could not stand this character. Every time she came up, I was like, just shut up. Like I got so tired of her. So hopefully she grows on me. I don't know. A lot of people didn't like Murphy from the Dresden Files when they first started that series, but Murphy is like everybody's favorite character now, so who knows. um Tom Maryland, I don't have much to say about him. He's a lot of people's like favorite character, and I was kind of like, okay, he's like the bard character. He kind of takes Rand and Matt under his wing and teaches them to juggle and stuff. And when he like supposedly died, he's definitely not dead, but when he like supposedly died, I was kind of like, okay, well, Matt and Rand are like on their own now, and so I didn't really care that much. Elias was a cool character, even though we only get to meet him for a little bit. He was the original person that Perrin and Egwene had met who can talk to wolves. And that was super cool. I really like the idea that there is more magic in this world than just like using the true power to cast firebolts. Yeah, and then we have Loyal, who is our Ogier. And he's kind of like this big, like gentle giant. Rand is like terrified of him at first, thinking that he is a Trolloc. But he explains that he's not a Trolloc, and kind of explains more about his society and how like peace loving they are, and how old they are. He's super, super old, and he often forgets how old other people are. And so I liked his character a lot, and I was super excited when he kind of joined the party. And then we have Balsamond, and I was confused on. I didn't know. I couldn't tell if Balsamond is he like the dark one, like the big bad. And because Rand definitely didn't defeat him in the end, and Moraine was kind of like, trying to tell him that, but he's like, no, I defeated the dark one. And she's like, okay. But yeah, like but Balsamond was fine. Like I liked him for being like kind of the Dark Lord figure. But I just couldn't figure out if he was like the big bad that we got to worry about, or if he was just like one of the like generals in the army kind of thing. I didn't have, like I said, I didn't have any favorite quotes for this book, so I'm gonna skip that. Um, Favorite moments or most emotional moments. So like I said, everything in the Two Rivers or in Emmons Field, I really liked all that stuff. Rand pulling his sick father through the woods in the dead of night. Robert Jordan did such a good job kind of describing what it's like to walk in pitch blackness in the middle of the woods, and how every single sound is terrifying. Also, like how heavy something becomes after carrying it for so long or dragging it, and just how terrifying it was for him as far as like, minute to minute survival. Like that was probably that was probably like the most intense scene for me, I think. Like just him trying to get from the farm to the city without a horse, having to drag his sick father. Eventually, he finds a small cart that he has to fix, and all the while trying to evade like Trollocs. That was really scary. And Robert Jordan did a really good job of just kind of portraying what that situation is like, talking about Rand's fatigue and I don't know about you, but I've walked in the woods in the middle of night, and it is super, super scary. It is not fun. And I feel like Robert Jordan just did a really good job kind of conveying that. And I really, really like that scene. Of course, during that whole thing, Tam kind of rambles in his sleep about finding Rand in the snow when he and his new wife were headed back to Two Rivers. I'm super excited to find out more about this. This is probably one of the biggest mysteries that I'm most excited to learn about, kind of who Rand's parents really are, and kind of what that means as far as like Rand's lineage, like his ancestry. And so I think that's going to be a huge part of the books coming up. So when his when his father gets really he's sick on the way down to the city, and Moraine is just barely able to pull him back from the edge of death. And then Rand is told that he has to leave his father and the Two Rivers. And I think that's the image that's behind me. I think that's them leaving the Two Rivers, and it's one of my favorite pieces of art. Even before I started reading The Wheel of Time, I absolutely love this image here. And I just kind of picture this when they're leaving, and it's they're leaving in the middle of night, and they're trying to get to the next place, and they just everybody's saying their goodbyes, and it's super hard to kind of read because I don't know anything that happens in the future of these books, but I'm gonna assume that they don't come back to the city. I'm gonna assume that they never make it back here, because the adventure is just gonna go and go and go. And I think that Emmons Field is probably going to be destroyed at some point when the Dark One really starts looking for Rand. And they're definitely going to go after his father. I don't think that anybody in the village is safe, even though the boys left. Moraine telling the story of Manetheren to the crowd that was yelling at her. I really like that, and kind of getting this early reveal into the history of the Two Rivers. Matt and Rand juggling and performing for their stay in the inns. I loved that. They had the Gleeman's flute, and I think his harp and his juggling balls. And so Matt would like juggle and Rand would play the flute. And I just loved that picture, just the picture of them in these inns performing for their stay. And then they go to that one inn where it's the people running it are trying to steal Rand's sword. His I'm gonna butcher the name of the sword, but his special sword, and heron marked, right? Yeah, heron marked blade. And so they kind of get guided into this back room where they're like, you can stay here. And then like they're waiting to get the sword, and then the Murdraw shows up. I think it was a Murdraw that showed up. It was either that or some other dark friend. And then it appears as though Rand kind of pulls down lightning on the place and just like completely blasts everybody. I love this idea of having to watch out for dark friends. I was constantly on my toes about having to watch out for literally any person to backstab them because you don't know, there's no way to know who's who. And it makes you as the reader question every single person they come into contact with, especially when, you know, all these dark friends and Murdra and stuff are drawn to Rand and the other boys like magnets. Um, you know, it's always kind of wondering, like, whenever a new character comes on screen, it's like, oh, are they, is this a good person or is this someone that's gonna like try to screw them over? And I feel like you can kind of always tell, at least so far, but still there was many times where I was like, you know, very like on the edge of my seat as they're kind of like going from place to place. Um, Especially the one person that showed up, the one person I didn't expect to be a dark friend was the lady who showed up when Rand is sick in the when Rand is sick in the stable. And you know, at first you think she's like an Aes Sedai, and then she ends up being this dark friend. When Rand falls over the castle wall and he meets Elaine, and I think Gowan is her brother's name. Um, I really liked that scene, and I'm really hoping that these are going to be friends that like they stay friends with Rand throughout the series. I'm really looking forward to that like relationship growing. And I'm also, as much as I like Egwene and Rand, I'm also kind of shipping Rand and Elaine. I think that would be a fantastic pairing. So if Egwene doesn't work out, Elaine would be great too. The castle's Aes Sedai says there are dark things happening, and somehow Rand is at the center of it. This is after the guards come out and pull Rand into the castle. And then not too long after that, I was so excited. It was like the most hype moment for me when Moraine and everyone else had shown up in Caemlyn and reunited with Rand and Matt. It had been so long that they were apart and like on their own that it made me so happy when they were reunited. And it was just like this moment of like, yes, finally, like everybody is all together. Like I could not imagine traveling and like everybody kind of has a vague idea that they're all going to meet up in Caemlyn, but they never explicitly agreed on it. Um, and so imagine like getting there without a cell phone. You have no way to even send them a letter because who knows where they are. And so you're just kind of in the city, like waiting for your friends to arrive. And it could literally decide the rest of your life. So that was like so like I was wondering if they weren't going to get reunited at all in this book. And so I was so excited when they finally did. Then they travel to find the Eye of the World. The whole battle that Rand kind of got teleported into was awesome, and he just called down like magic left and right. Also around that time, the Green Man died, which was really really sad. The group recovered the Horn of Valir, and I'm wondering if it's the horn mentioned in the Great. It, isn't there a poem in this book called The Great Hunt, or like a some sort of story about finding this horn? And so I'm wondering if that is in relation to this. And apparently it calls the heroes of old back from the dead to fight against the Dark One. Um, and I'm kind of wondering if Rand is to become the dragon. I'm wondering if this horn doesn't so much call heroes of old back from the dead, but it calls back their mantle, like their title, and kind of imbibes whatever descendant with the spirit of that mantle. And so I'm interested to see if that's how Rand becomes the dragon. They recover the banner of the dragon and the seventh seal that binds the Dark One. And so that's interesting. I'm excited to see, if they've broken one of the seals that binds the Dark One, does that mean that he has even more influence on this world if he's able to reach out a little bit more? So I'm so excited for the second book. Like I wanna read it so bad. Rand, oh yeah. So at the end, I was so taken by surprise and I was so sad. Rand decides to leave the group, and like Moraine knows now that she has found the dragon reborn, and so she kind of has her own like little epilogue. But Rand deciding to leave the group was so like heartbreaking for me. I'm just like, don't do it, man. Like go, like stay with them and like go where everybody else is going. I don't know what he expects to kind of figure out about himself while he goes, but I really hope that somebody goes with him. I hope we start the second book and either Matt or Perrin decided to go with him. That would also be very Lord of the Rings, right? Um, so so yeah, I really loved the ending, and at the end there, I was like, after finishing this, I really felt like, oh man, like I just felt like kind of like empty and like there was like this void. And I've heard people say that about getting to the end of the series and feeling that. So if I'm already feeling that way, I'm like, man, the ending of this series is gonna totally break me. And yeah, I wish I wish I could immediately go on to the second book. Future book questions or popular theories for this. So here's my theories and questions. So will we learn any more about Tam or about Manethrin? Because I am now extremely interested in Tam's backstory, because it turns out he didn't grow up in, or maybe he did grow up in Emmons Field, but he left for a while. And so I'm interested to hear about what his time outside Emmons Field was like, how he met his wife, and how he got a hold of a heron marked blade. So how exactly will Rand learn about his destiny? Because I don't think right now he knows that he's the dragon reborn. And so I'm wondering like how that'll come about, and if he'll be like, no, like that's impossible, and kind of like not take it seriously at first. And I'm also wondering like what does he have to do to actually defeat the Dark One? And most of all, will he survive it? I kind of think that at the end of this series, we're going to end up with kind of a mirror image of the prologue. And Rand will have to sacrifice himself or something to kill the Dark One. And I think Rand is going to die at the end of the series. I don't know why I think that, but I feel like I feel like that's the right way to go. But yeah, I think at the end we'll end up with like the thing that happened in the prologue. I think that's going to be like the ending of the book plus like an epilogue or whatever. But I think that we're going to get I think we're going to get that scene again, but with Rand and somebody else. Maybe Matt. Will Matt go to the dark side? I really think that Matt is going to become, a bad guy, and because he's such an idiot, and he's got that dagger, and his mind is just completely warped by the dark side. And so, yeah, I'm interested to see how that goes. So as far as my like final thoughts, I loved it, right? Like I would absolutely read the second book immediately if it weren't for our podcast schedule. And I don't even know when I'm going to be able to read the second book. I hope it's soon, because I really think the second book is going to be really, really good. So yeah, I'm super excited for that. I'm going to recommend this series to like everyone now. And I think, or at least the people that are like into Lord of the Rings and stuff. I think Chris is going to read it probably, because he was really into Lord of the Rings when he was younger. So yeah, hopefully we'll have some more content on this. I don't know exactly how we'll do it, because Gabe's probably not going to read the second book. So, I'll have to figure out something fun that is a little bit more finished than this, because I had planned the podcast for two people, but it's just me. So this is, I don't know how much you guys are enjoying this. If you did like this, just like hearing me talk about the book and kind of my general thoughts, then leave a comment and let me know. And I'd be happy to do this again. But yeah, just let me know like what you think of this content. I'll try to organize the notes a little bit better next time too. So I'm very cautiously excited for the show, which is honestly like why I read this book, like shamelessly read this book just because the show is coming out. But I'm starting to get worried that they're going to change a lot. Like I'm starting to get worried that they would do something like have Egwene be the dragon or something. I really don't like it when things go too far from the books. Even the Expanse show is starting to go a little bit further from the books than I appreciate. And so I would really hate to see this like amazing story be told any other way. I think this is going to be a fantastic series, and I really hope that the show does it justice and focuses on the right characters and kind of gets the feeling of the books across. All right, I think that's all I got. I'm probably gonna wrap it up there. Sorry if this was a little haphazard. Thank you for everyone for listening to this episode of the File Fantasies. Remember to like and subscribe down below. It really does help us a lot. And please check out our Twitter at Files Fantasy. Are you guys excited for the show? Are you cautious about it? Let me know down in the comments below what you think it's going to be like. Our next episode will be The Haunting of Hill House, unless it's already been posted, before this video goes up. And then talking to Chris about the first time reading The Name of the Wind, so stay tuned for that. After that, we'll be going through the Greenbone saga as we get close to the release of the third book at the end of November. So I'm trying to get some advanced reader copies so that we can, listen to it before it comes out to get a review right on time. But yeah, we'll be doing the Greenbone saga, and Jade Legacy will probably be at the end of November if everything goes well. So stay tuned for that. Until next time, the wheel weaves as the wheel wills.